As Margaret said, this latest interest in RPL started with the COAG statement. By the 1st of January 2007, all RTOs and assessment centres in receipt of public funds would have contractual obligations to offer all workers entering training who are not new entrants to the workforce a quick and simple process to recognise their skills. And that's been the driver that's driven us for the last 3 years. My talk this morning focuses on element 3 of TAA Assess 402A, Assess Competence. Supporting the candidate is not something that we might do or could do if we feel well, or it's the soft end of the equation. It's an essential part of competency assessment as part of the TAA. And of course, the reason it was so important to come through was it wasn't happening, and Margaret's alluded to this. When these figures are from the start of that process, 2006 NCVER, and you can see that, ironically, the simpler the competency, the less RPL was being done. So we weren't good at it. There was quite differentials. If you had more paper available to you, basically that's diplomas. Diploma people had more access to paper and filing cabinets and historical data. You got more RPL. But we were getting worse at it. You'll see year after year, less RPL was getting done. Something had to happen. And if you're from an industry point of view, you say, how can this be? When people are appointed to jobs, they aren't done on a whim. They are interviewed, they're questioned, they're followed up. When they get in there, they get induction training, in-service, mentoring, performance reviews. And then at work, they actually use the competencies. They work alongside people with the same job description who have got the qualification that they haven't got. No special allowances made for them that they haven't got a qualification the other person has. And they're valued workers. But when it came to getting RPL, it just wasn't happening. And it was about percentages, paradigms and perceptions. Percentages, if I was 80% competent in everything because we assessed competencies by silos, the single competency, if I wasn't 100% competent in that competency, I was not yet competent. So 80% competent in everything meant not yet competent in everything. And I've argued for a long time that we need a validation pathway that picks up what we know and a developmental pathway that picks up what we don't know and can move it, but not necessarily going into full-on training. The paradigms were also very wrong. We made the power relationships. The person who knew least about the competency standards, about the AQTF, about all that, was often given the portfolio guide and said, go off and collect your evidence. The least powerful person was made responsible to drive the whole process. It was too much focused on the past, it was too much focused on paper, and the role of the assessor was often miscast and devalued. But it was also about perceptions. It was made out to be complex, and I agree it is complex, but training is complex. The whole mapping out of the sequencing of training is a complex activity. But we have sold this as complex. We've sold it as costly. We've sold it as controversial. What will the auditor say? Will it have parity of esteem? And of course, you'll know that Sir Humphrey always advised Bernard that, Bernard, if you do not want the minister to sign off on something, there are 3 words you must include in the briefing. If you tell the minister it is complex, costly and controversial, he will never sign off on it. And candidates haven't signed off on it, and teachers haven't signed off on it, and administrators haven't signed off on it because of these factors. We need to change the default option. We need to change RPL from being the little icing on the top, the extra if you're really good enough and motivated enough, to being the default option. Dan O'Reilly tells a story of medicos, of an experiment that was done with medicos, and they get the physicians in, a whole group of physicians, and they explain to them that there's a patient that's been coming to them for some time with pain in the hip. They've tried various regimes with him, And eventually they've got to the point of deciding that he's on the road to a hip replacement. Okay, so he's already on the road now, the decision's been made, on the road to the hip replacement, booked in, whatever, on the waiting list. And then he gets one group of the physicians and he tells them, you sat and looked at the case notes again last night and reviewed the case notes, and you found that you had not tried ibuprofen with this person. So what do? Is it hip replacement or try ibuprofen? Well, fortunately, most physicians said, bring them back, get them on the ibuprofen, see whether that works. The other group of physicians, they said, you've read the case notes and you realise there's two medications you haven't tried him on, ibuprofen and Proximax. So now, the decision to let him keep going down the road to a hip replacement is just as easy. But the decision to bring him back is a bit more complex. Because if I bring him back, do I try him on ibuprofen or Proximax? Which one first, which one, how long, and whatever. Do you know that most physicians let them go off to hip replacement? Now, if they weren't already on the list, if I come into their office and they say, well, let me see, there's three options, ibuprofen, Proximax or hip replacement, okay, we'll go hip replacement. There's no way a doctor would do that. But once it becomes the default position, if I do nothing, that's what happens. When I'm faced with complexity, it doesn't take too much complexity to say, I'll just go with the flow. And that's why we've always said it's easier just to go with the class. We had it said to us yesterday. It's easier to do the course. It's easier to do the course. Doing the course is the default position. And it takes a lot to pull back. And then when we do, we're faced with a complexity that is often beyond what it needs to be. If we're going to get good at RPL, we've got to renew our respect for experiential learning. And I haven't got a lot of time to go through it, but unless we understand the veracity and validity of experiential learning, we will not do justice to the skills of those before us. Most of us are familiar with it, we've learned it. I advise you to go back and continue to read and start to refresh your memory and promote it amongst your